Alrighty. Well, I haven't done anything pop culture in a little while, so here's my thing. If you haven't seen the movie Forrest Gump, you've missed out on something that's pretty darn good. It's a good movie. Tom Hanks is in it, and one of his earlier kind of defining roles that kind of brought him into the national spotlight. He was really, uh, it's really good. And as far as the traditional narrative is concerned, it's about kind of a slow, maybe mentally retarded, southern, simple, good old boy white kid from the South during the 60s, 70s who um, comes up from nothing, gets into the army, gets a Medal of Honor, and becomes a shrimp boat captain, and ends up at the very end. He's telling this story while he's sitting at a bus stop to just anybody who would sit down long enough to listen to it. But the film itself, the story, has received portions of criticism from different fields, and one of them, one of the most significant kind of criticisms, is that it whitewashes African American history. In that, and one of the things that it cites the most is how that supposedly Elvis Presley, of all people, visited his mom's house a long time ago, in part of kind of the parade of other strange and eccentric people that would visit his house over time, and playing the guitar, and that he would play, and young Forrest Gump would dance while he was playing, and that's where Elvis Presley discovered his kind of shaking his hips, essentially. Even though historically we know that Elvis Presley didn't get that from some slow white kid, but in fact he got that from a from African American musicians, Chuck Berry, rock and roll blues musicians. That's where he got both his kind of his musical sound as well as his performance capacity. That's where he got it from. And so that's a way that, and they kind of frame it as well through with other movies like An American Werewolf and others, where it's white people taking on typically African American traits, and that's what whitewashing is. Well, this is my thing though. What if it's not just those little detail aspects of the story that are whitewashed? What if the entire story, what if the whole thing, what if Forrest Gump actually is an African American growing up in the segregated Jim Crow South, that the story itself has been appropriated or stolen by a white guy who's now telling this story at a bus stop about box of chocolates? Here's what I'm saying is, imagine if you're in the South, you're growing up, most of the story really doesn't make all that much sense if in fact he is really just kind of a retarded white kid growing up. Why is it that these good old boy Southerners, who supposedly were taught manners and whatever else, along with typical Southern gentility, why are they harassing this kid with braces on his legs? If he's just stupid as stupid does, why are they harassing him? And the story tries to frame it as if it's just bullying, but imagine if it, instead of it being a little white kid, what if it's a little black kid? And all of a sudden, of course he's being harassed, because not only is he a little black kid walking alone, but he's actually a little black kid walking with a blonde hair, blue-eyed white girl, and Jenny, obviously Jenny. All of a sudden, it's incredibly unacceptable, out of line for him to be doing that. If he was just a slow white kid, no one would care about that. And then again, while he's young, as part of the story, why is it states pretty explicitly that he knew that Jenny was being molested by her dad, that he was always hugging on her, kissing her, touching her, right? He knew it. And they try to frame that as well, like he's just stupid and he didn't understand what was happening. But what if he did, and that's his way of trying to make it known, I guess? But the thing is, if you're a black kid in the South, you're not going to talk to the police about that, because you're not going to talk to the police about anything. Because if anything, you'd expect them to turn the accusation on you rather than them actually investigate something. Because it's not like other people didn't know what was happening as well. They just, nobody brought it up. So, moving forward into the story, why is it that him and Bubba build the giant, like the strong relationship bond that they build, excluding everyone else? No one else builds really any kind of friendship with Forrest throughout his entire military career except Bubba. Why? If he's just white, that doesn't make any sense. But if he's black, of course, the only two black guys in their unit would build a stronger bond with one another than with any of the other members of their unit. And then he receives a Medal of Honor for valor for rescuing all of his fellow squad mates, essentially, which only 20 black guys, only 20 African Americans received Medal of Honor citations throughout all of the Vietnam War. So that's pretty uncommon. Like, that's an interesting detail that really is extraordinarily rare. I mean, the number of Medal of Honor recipients in general is already pretty rare, but only 20 throughout the entirety of Vietnam went to African Americans. And then he's able to kind of just tromps right into a Black Panther annex, whatever you want to call that, meeting. He just walks right in. Nobody really pays him any attention. And you want to say, like, well, it's because he knows Jenny, but that wouldn't have any difference. That wouldn't make any difference. If he's white, he's incredibly out of place in that moment. But if he's black, or if he's half black, then he's especially going to be just fine there, right? So, all of that to say this. If it's stolen, if it's this whole story is stolen by a white guy telling the story of a black man, who would do that? Who would do it? And this is what I think. It's Lieutenant Dan. It's not uncommon for people to steal the stories of their squad mates, or people, or even outside the military. It's not uncommon for you to hear somebody tell a story, and it's a good one, and then later meet other people that don't know that person, and then just take their story because it fits into whatever else you're already talking about, and just take their name off and put your name on, because it makes a good conversation piece. It makes a good whatever, right? That's a fairly common phenomenon, and it's broadcast, or it's whatever, throughout bars and nightclubs and whatever else throughout this entire country. It's going to be this evening, tomorrow evening, it's going to be featured everywhere. Someone's doing that. So it's not super uncommon, but it's especially common in realms that involve stolen valor, where a soldier will tell a story that is really compelling or whatever, that makes them sound good, or even a civilian will tell a story that is compelling and interesting and involves extraordinary feats of strength or whatever, that involves someone else, maybe even someone who died there, instead of themselves, but they'll just make themselves the star of the story. Sometimes to get free drinks, maybe to get laid, maybe like various things. There's various motivations behind it. Some places, some states have actually made that illegal, but every time there's a holiday that comes up, especially Memorial Day, Veterans Day, 4th of July, people will put on fake uniforms with fake medals that they picked up at an antique store or something, and they will uh, wear it specifically that night or that weekend in the interest of getting free drinks from people around them. And it's super, super uncouth, uh, really skeezy, but it is a thing that happens. And so, if what I'm thinking is it's Lieutenant Dan, and I think that because of the fact that anything that gets somebody a Medal of Honor is a story worth telling, and he inserts himself into the story to make himself kind of a pity case throughout it. Lost his legs and all that stuff. Gary Sinise's character, right? He inserts himself into this character into the story in order to kind of deflect attention away from themselves. But that's what I'm thinking. It was Lieutenant Dan stealing the story of Forrest Gump as a final act, I guess you could say, of whitewashing a compelling story of a poor African American kid overcoming harassment and military service in order to become a shrimp boat billionaire.